All right, so are you ready to dive deep into the Constitution?
Always ready for a good constitutional deep dive?
Me too. Today, we're going to tackle power.
Power, huh?
Yeah, how it's split up, balanced, maybe even fought over in the U.S. government.
Sounds juicy.
Oh, it is. You sent us some key sections, right, from Article 1 of the Constitution, sections 7, 8, 9, and 10.
The heart of the matter.
Exactly. And let me tell you, these sections are where the action is. Checks and balances, not just an idea, but how things actually work.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I mean, this document written centuries ago still runs our government today.
It's a blueprint for sure.
A blueprint for power, yeah. And we're going to decode it together.
Love it. And you know what they say? Follow the money.
Always good advice.
Right. So Article 1, Section 7, it jumps right into the money part.
The financial heart of it all.
Exactly. Any bills about raising revenue, meaning taxes, have to start in the House of Representatives.
It's all about the people.
What do you mean?
Well, back then, think about it. The House was the only part of the government directly chosen by the people. They were the closest to what everyday people were worried about.
Makes sense.
So giving them the power of the purse, that's what they call it, it made sure people had a say in how their money was used.
Like, no taxation without representation.
That's exactly it. It was a big deal during the American Revolution,
Oh, absolutely. So it's like a safety valve built right in. But of course, there's more to the story, right? The Senate gets involved too.
Oh, definitely. The House starts those money bills, but the Senate, they can change them. Sometimes big time.
Whoa.
It's not a one-sided power grab.
More like a dance.
Yeah, a dance. Both chambers have a say in how the nation's finances work.
I bet those steps get complicated.
You can say that again.
Okay, so let's move on to the president. Article 1, Section 7 gives the president the power to veto bills, right, from Congress.
Big power move.
And they've got a deadline. 10 days, no Sundays. Can you imagine the pressure in the Oval Office?
Oh, I bet it's intense. Right.
That veto power is huge. It's like a check on Congress, making them think twice before they pass anything.
So they can't just do whatever they want.
Nope, not at all. They have to think, will the president go for this? It's a high-stakes game.
But Congress can push back. Right?
Oh, yeah, they can override a veto. But here's the thing, it takes a supermajority. 2/3 of both the House and the Senate.
Oh, that's a lot.
It's a high bar, on purpose. It means Congress has to really believe in a bill if they want to challenge the president.
Yeah, that's a power struggle. But wait, there's more, right? There's this thing called the pocket veto.
Ah, yes, the pocket veto. It's a bit sneaky.
Sneaky. How so?
If Congress goes home, adjourns, before those 10 days are up and the president hasn't signed, the bill just dies.
What? No big veto message? No drama?
Nope, just a quiet death.
Wow, that's almost more powerful than a regular veto. It's like a secret weapon.
Yeah.
Speaking of power, Article 1, Section 8 lays out what Congress is supposed to do. And it is a lot.
They've got their work cut out for them. Taxes, borrowing money, regulating all that commerce stuff. Post offices even. Declaring war.
It's a long list. They have so many responsibilities. I mean, the framers really wanted the legislature to have the most power.
It seems that way.
But there's this phrase in that list that's super important. The necessary and proper clause.
I've heard of that. But it's always sounded kind of vague to me.
Yeah, well, this is where it gets interesting.
Okay, tell me more.
It means Congress can make laws that are, well, necessary and proper for doing all that other stuff on their list.
So they can adapt, you're saying?
Exactly. The framers knew they couldn't predict every problem.
So this clause, it's like built-in flexibility.
You got it. It makes the Constitution a living document,
So it can change with the times.
Right. But of course, there have been tons of debates about it, court cases even, people arguing how far does it really go?
How much power does it really give?
That's the question. Think of it like a rubber band. Stretchy, but it has limits.
I like that.
So yeah, it's not just a list. It's a framework for dealing with new stuff, new challenges.
Pretty amazing foresight for the 18th century, wouldn't you say?
Totally. They knew a rigid document wouldn't last. The Constitution had to be able to grow, just like the nation itself.
So we've seen all these powers Congress has, right? But the Constitution also says, hold on, there are limits.
Right. It sets boundaries like, here's what you can do, but here's what you absolutely cannot do.
And some of these things are kind of surprising. Like Congress can't pass these things called bills of attainder.
Yeah, bills of attainder, those are legislative acts that basically say, you're guilty and here's your punishment, but without a trial.
Wait, what That sounds terrifying. Like, no chance to defend yourself.
Exactly. The framers hated that idea.
Yeah.
They'd seen how it could be used, to target people for political reasons or just because they were unpopular.
So they said, nope, everyone gets due process.
Right. A fair trial, a chance to present evidence, defend yourself, all that. That's a core principle of justice. And there's more. The Constitution also bans something called ex post facto laws.
Ex post facto. That sounds kind of complicated.
It means you can't be punished for something that wasn't a crime when you did it, or if they make the punishment worse after you did it.
So no changing the rules of the game in the middle of it? That's not fair at all.
Exactly. It's about fairness, yeah, but also predictability. The framers knew that ex post facto laws could be used to target people unfairly.
So they built in this protection against that.
Right. They wanted laws to be applied fairly, and predictably. No surprises, no gotcha moments.
It's like a safety net for justice, I guess.
You could say that. And hey, speaking of safety nets, Article 1, Section 9, it also talks about protecting the writ of habeas corpus.
Habeas corpus, now there's some serious legal Latin. What does that even mean?
Basically, it means show me the body. It's a legal right that says if you're detained, you can challenge that in court. Make sure the government isn't just locking people up for no reason.
So it's like a check on the government's power.
Exactly. It's a big deal for individual liberty. The Constitution's very clear about protecting it. In fact, it even lays out very specific times when habeas corpus can be suspended, like during a rebellion or invasion.
Wow, they really did think of everything, but it makes you think, why were they so worried about limiting government power?
Well, remember, they had just fought a war to get free from what they saw as a tyrannical government.
Right, King George and all that.
They were deeply suspicious of concentrated power, They wanted to make sure that kind of tyranny couldn't happen in the United States.
So they were building a government on the idea that power should be limited, divided up. Pretty revolutionary for its time, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. No one person or branch of government should have too much power. It's all about checks and balances. And these protections we've been talking about in Article 1, Section 9, they're a big part of that.
It all makes sense now. Okay, but let's shift gears for a minute. Let's talk about states and the federal government, that whole relationship.
Yes, that's always a tricky one.
Article 1, Section 10, it goes right into that mess. And it seems like the framers were trying to walk a tightrope.
Trying to find that sweet spot, yeah. The Constitution created a federal system, so power is shared. But Section 10, it puts the brakes on what states can do. No making treaties with other countries, no printing their own money, no going to war unless they're invaded.
It's like they're saying, you're part of a team now, states.
That's a good way to put it. They knew they needed a strong national government, right? For things like defense, foreign policy, a single currency. They didn't want the country to fall apart into little mini nations, each doing their own thing.
So unity and stability, those were big goals.
Huge. But they didn't want to completely take away states' power either.
Right. States still have their own roles to play.
Absolutely. The framers knew that states were closer to the people. They understood the different needs in different places. They left a lot of power to the states, like in education, healthcare, things like that.
It's like a big, complicated puzzle with all these pieces fitting together in a very particular way.
And the Constitution is the box, showing you how it's supposed to look when it's all put together.
Perfect analogy. But before we get lost in all the details, let's take a step back. What are the big things we've learned so far from Article 1?
Well, one big idea is limited government. The framers were really focused on that, distributing power, making sure no one entity gets too powerful.
Like those safeguards we were talking about.
Exactly. The separation of powers, checks and balances, all those limits on both the federal government and the states.
It's like they were building in protection against the very tyranny they'd just fought to escape.
Exactly. And another big takeaway, federalism, dividing up the power between the national government and the states. That was a big deal back then.
It's amazing how these ideas from centuries ago still matter today.
Right. The Constitution isn't just some old document. It's alive, It's always evolving, being reinterpreted as we face new challenges.
So it's not just about the past, it's about the present and the future, too.
Right. It's a framework that guides our government, shapes our society. And understanding its strengths and weaknesses, it's essential for any citizen who wants to be informed, who wants to participate.
I love that. Now, we've talked a lot about theory, but I'm curious, how do these principles actually play out in real life?
Oh, there are tons of examples. Let's take that necessary and proper clause.
Why?
Sounds simple, but it's been at the heart of some major debates throughout history. Like the case of McCulloch v. Maryland, back in 1819.
McCulloch v. Maryland, that name rings a bell. Something about a bank.
You got it. It was about whether Congress could even create a national bank. That power wasn't directly listed in the Constitution.
So it was a showdown over federal power.
Exactly. Alexander Hamilton, he was all about a strong national government. He said, look, the necessary and proper clause gives us the power to do what we need to do, even if it's not specifically listed. He thought a national bank was crucial, to manage the economy, keep the country unified.
Feels like a good idea, but I bet not everyone agreed.
Oh, definitely not. Thomas Jefferson, he was all about states' rights. He hated the idea of a national bank, thought it would give the federal government way too much power.
Classic Federalists versus anti-Federalists, even years after the Constitution was ratified.
That's American history for you. And that debate about the balance of power, it's still going on today. We see it with healthcare, education, the environment, guns, you name it. The tension between national unity and local control, it's built right into our system.
Like that dance we were talking about before.
Exactly. But this time, it's the federal government and the states doing the dancing.
A dance that's always changing, I bet.
Oh, absolutely. New steps are added, old steps get reinterpreted as we face new stuff, as things change.
It's a reminder that the Constitution, it's not stuck in the past. It's alive and kicking, changing as we do.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But let's look at another example of how these ideas have been tested. What about the Commerce Clause? That one's always popping up in the news.
The Commerce Clause. Oh, yeah. Congress gets to regulate commerce between states. Sounds straightforward enough.
Yeah, you'd think so, right? But it's actually caused a ton of debate.
How so?
Well, how it's been interpreted, that's the thing.
So tell me, how has it changed over time?
In the early days, it was mostly about stuff like tariffs and shipping, making sure goods and services could move freely across state lines.
Makes sense, but that was a different time. What about now, with the global economy and all that?
That's where things get interesting. In the 20th century, the Supreme Court started looking at the Commerce Clause more broadly. Yeah, they started using it to justify federal regulations in areas that you might not think are about interstate commerce. Things like working conditions, manufacturing standards, even farming practices.
Whoa, so even stuff happening within a state could be seen as affecting commerce between states.
Exactly. If it had an impact, even indirectly, on interstate commerce, the federal government could step in. And this really took off during the New Deal, with President Roosevelt.
The New Deal to deal with the Great Depression.
Right. He used the Commerce Clause to create all kinds of programs, minimum wage laws, workplace safety rules, price supports for farmers, all under the umbrella of regulating commerce.
It's amazing how a clause from the 1700s could be used to deal with problems in the 1900s.
That's the power of the Constitution, I guess. But of course, not everyone was happy about it. Some people said, wait a minute, this is federal overreach. What about states' rights?
Sounds like that same tension popping up again.
It's a constant theme in American history. And the Commerce Clause is right in the middle of it.
So it's not just about commerce anymore. It's about how much power the federal government has.
Right. It's about defining those boundaries, that balance between national and state power. A lot riding on one little clause.
I'm seeing that. It's like peeling back layers, with every layer more complicated than the last.
It is. But let's bring it back down to earth for a minute. Remember that thing in Article 1, Section 9, about no bills of attainder?
The one about no guilty verdicts without a trial.
Yep. That idea, it's actually had a big impact on American law and politics.
Really?
Tell me more. During wars or times of crisis, there's always a temptation to skip due process, right? To target people based on who they are or what people think they might do.
That's scary.
It is. But that ban on bills of attainder, it's been a shield against that kind of thinking. It's protected people's rights.
So it's not just a theoretical thing, it's a real safeguard.
Exactly. The Constitution isn't just a bunch of words. It has real power. It shapes how our government works. It protects our freedoms. That's why it's so important to understand it, even centuries later.
It's amazing, how these ideas from the Constitution actually affect us. But let's go back to Article 1, Section 10 for a minute.
Back to those limits on states.
Yeah, it feels like a constant push and pull between state power and federal power.
It is. It's a balancing act. It's been there from the beginning. The framers, they wanted to bring the nation together, but they also wanted to let states keep some of their freedom.
Find that sweet spot, right?
Yeah, that sweet spot. And it's still going on today. Look at debates about the environment, guns, immigration, all those things where state laws and federal laws bump into each other.
And the courts have to figure out who wins.
Exactly. It's like they're constantly rewriting the rules of the game, states, and the federal government. But let's get specific. What are some examples of things states just can't do, according to Article 1, Section 10?
Yeah, give us the details.
Okay, so one big one is states can't make treaties with other countries. That's only for the federal government.
Makes sense. Imagine if each state had its own foreign policy.
It would be chaos.
Total chaos.
Total chaos. The framers, they knew the U.S. had to speak with one voice to the rest of the world. No going rogue, states.
It's like team effort only.
Exactly. It's about national security, being stable on the world stage, no states competing with each other, starting their own wars, one united front.
Makes sense. But have there ever been times when states tried to do their own thing anyway?
Oh, sure. There have been times when states tested the limits. Some have tried to make their own sanctions against certain countries or tried to mess with trade deals that they didn't like.
So it's a real power struggle, not just something in a textbook.
It's real. And it shows that tension, between what the nation decides and what states want to do. It's built into our system.
Okay, so no treaties. What else can't states do?
Well, another big one is no making their own money. No separate currencies for each state. Again, that's the federal government's job.
I can see why. Think of the hassle trying to exchange money every time you crossed a state line.
Ugh, yeah. It'd be a nightmare. It would mess up the economy too, probably. A single national currency. It makes things so much simpler. Buying and selling, doing business across state lines. It helps make the economy stronger, more united.
It's like the oil that keeps the engine running smoothly. But wait, I thought back in the day, states used to have their own banks, their own money.
Yeah, they did, early on. But it caused a lot of problems. Fake money, inflation, nobody knew what anything was really worth. The framers saw that and said, we need a system everyone can trust. That's why they put the federal government in charge of the money.
So the Constitution brought some order to the chaos.
Exactly. And that's had a huge impact on how the American economy has developed, even its place in the world's financial system.
Wow, it's wild how these little details in the Constitution have had such big effects.
It is. But let's look at one more thing states can't do. From Article 1, Section 10, states can't go to war.
No wars. That sounds like a good thing.
It is. The framers, they really wanted to stop states from fighting each other or starting wars with other countries on their own. They'd seen how bad that could be. They wanted the federal government to be the one making those decisions for the whole country.
Makes sense. United we stand, divided we fall, right?
That's the idea. They didn't want the U.S. to become a bunch of little countries always fighting. War was too serious to leave up to individual states. It had to be a national decision.
But what if a state gets attacked? Can they defend themselves?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The Constitution says states can defend themselves if they're invaded or if there's a rebellion happening. They don't have to wait for Congress to give them permission in those cases. It's about protecting the people, right? Sometimes you got to act fast.
So it's not that states can never use force. It's more about who gets to decide.
Right. It's about that balance again. State freedom versus national security.
A balance that's been tested many times, like the Civil War, right?
Exactly. Or even more recently, think about the National Guard and how they're used during emergencies. It's a tricky question. When and how states can use force? It's still debated today.
It's that constitutional dance again, isn't it? Always changing as we face new things.
It is. And that's what makes studying the Constitution so interesting. It's not just history. It's happening right now. It still shapes our government and our lives.
That's so true. Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into Article 1, I want to thank you for being our guide. It's been an incredible journey.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure. And remember, everyone, the Constitution isn't just for lawyers and scholars. It's for all of us. It's the foundation of our democracy.
It's ours to learn about, to talk about, to figure out what it means.
Exactly. So keep asking questions. Keep thinking critically about how the Constitution affects your life. It's not just words on a page. It's a living, breathing thing.
Beautifully put. And until next time, keep diving deep, everyone.